people that look like that have the capability to do that.
Pretty
yes.
accurate.
Nope.
No?
Not hard. Not hard at all.
Hard.
Let me dispel that.
Okay.
Okay. 200 yards from a prone position with a dead-on rifle. So if you have a dead-on rifle, so you set this rifle, you set your 0 to 200 yards, right? You know how far you're going to shoot. It is not hard.
They told everyone that the story was simple, a national tragedy, a grieving widow, and a nation united in sympathy. On the surface, it appeared to be a straightforward tale of loss and resilience. But when the layers were peeled back, that image began to crumble. The widow, people whispered, might not be who she claimed to be. Evidence began to surface, suggesting she had not just appeared by chance, but had been groomed, trained, and placed in position, not to mourn, but to inherit. The surface story of sorrow began to look more like a carefully constructed act. No one saw it coming. One moment, Charlie Kirk stood on stage, confident and fiery, speaking to thousands with conviction. The next, everything went silent. The noise of the crowd vanished, replaced by confusion and chaos. Within minutes, clips began flooding social media, and before the night had ended, the country was in collective shock. Hashtags exploded. News anchors stumbled through incomplete reports, struggling to make sense of what had just unfolded. Every corner of the internet began to ask the same question: what had really happened, and why now? As the confusion spread, what unsettled people most was not only the tragedy itself, but the strange silence that followed. The eerie stillness after the event felt unnatural, as though something vital was missing. Commentators and online personalities began their broadcasts, their voices heavy with unease. Something is not right. One host declared, "This isn't just a political story. What happened to my friend Charlie Kirk is a battle of evil versus good." The words echoed across platforms, feeding the growing suspicion that what had taken place on that stage went deeper than anyone yet understood. Hours passed before an official statement arrived from Turning Point USA. The organization announced that the security footage from the event was under review, but no recordings were released to the public. The absence of evidence only fueled more speculation. Online, rumors moved faster than verified facts. People began to suspect that something crucial was being hidden. Attention soon turned toward Erica Kirk. Observers noted her calmness and her appearance, saying her clothes seemed oddly inappropriate for someone mourning her husband, who had just been lost so publicly. "This woman isn't grieving," one viral post claimed. "She's acting." Others pointed out how quickly Erica had stepped into a leadership role. Within days, she had given multiple speeches, even appearing in a stadium, while Charlie's family remained silent. She had begun selling merchandise and had taken over her late husband's podcast, now hosting shows and even announcing an all-American halftime event. Critics accused her of using grief as a marketing tool, claiming she was performing rather than mourning. Some questioned her connections abroad, whispering about ties to Romania that had been mentioned in older videos and interviews. The conversation shifted from shock to cynicism. Online voices said this wasn't strength, it was theater. "They're using Christianity as a costume," one commenter wrote. "Forgiveness is not supposed to be a public show. They're using faith to turn corruption into holiness." In that narrative, Christianity itself became a tool not to comfort, but to control. Forgiveness became a weapon used to silence doubt, to make people feel righteous rather than skeptical. Soon, a larger question emerged. Was this resilience or a pre-planned performance? Many began suggesting that grief had been transformed into a media strategy. What was once spiritual strength now looked like stage-managed power. The tragedy, they argued, was being repackaged into a story of faith to prevent the public from asking uncomfortable questions. Religion had become the perfect disguise, a way to make manipulation look pure, to turn tragedy into something sacred and untouchable. Then came the twist that reignited the storm. Late one evening, A clip from the Joe Rogan experience began circulating online. His tone was calm but piercing, and one sentence in particular made millions stop scrolling. Rogan said, "I don't necessarily think they know what's going on yet. There's a lot of weird stuff happening with this." His words were careful but deliberate, and they echoed the uncertainty spreading across the country. He went on to describe strange inconsistencies. He mentioned a young man 22 years old whose photo had been shown by the media. Rogan questioned how the supposed shooter, who allegedly carried a rifle with a scope, could have been identified so quickly. The first images of that rifle, he said, looked completely different from what was described. He pointed out details like the composite stock, the model, and how the weapon resembled a modern .30-06 rifle, details that didn't match the official reports. Then came another bizarre twist. A man, older, apparently acting as a decoy, was seen shouting during the chaos. This same individual, Rogan claimed, had been present at other major national incidents, the September 11th attacks, the Boston bombings, and even other reported hoaxes. Witnesses said he stripped his pants off and shouted, "I did it," immediately after the event. He was arrested soon after, reportedly for unrelated charges of child pornography. The series of coincidences was too strange for many to ignore. Online, people began connecting dots that might not have existed. The initial descriptions of the suspect didn't match later photos. The supposed weapon didn't match witness accounts, and the story, which should have been straightforward, suddenly looked riddled with contradictions. The event, which was supposed to be a public meeting about faith and leadership, had turned into a national mystery. Inside the Utah Valley Arena, thousands had gathered to hear Charlie speak about faith and responsibility. As he addressed the crowd, the atmosphere was electric until the moment it wasn't. A loud crack, then silence. Screams filled the air as people ducked and scrambled for cover. Security rushed Charlie off the stage, and in the aftermath, the crowd of students became an army of live streamers, broadcasting their panic to the world. The chaos spread faster than any official report could. By morning, one name was everywhere: Tyler James Robinson, age 22. No one knew who he was. There was no clear motive, no background, no public record that tied him to the event. When questioned by authorities, he said nothing. His phone was wiped clean, no messages, no photos, no data, just emptiness. That silence became fuel for speculation. How could someone with no apparent history or reason commit an act that stunned a nation? Then, as the world tried to process it all, Erica Kirk appeared. Standing on stage, looking directly into the camera, she said, "I forgive him." The crowd applauded, some wept. Her statement spread everywhere within hours. It was September 21st, exactly 7 days after the tragedy. By then, everything had shifted. The story was no longer about the event itself, but about what it represented. Online, people debated endlessly, was this forgiveness genuine, or was it scripted? Was she truly mourning, or was she managing a narrative? The divide deepened. Some saw her as an image of faith and strength. Others saw her as part of a machine, turning sorrow into a performance. And as the discussion grew, so did the mystery. The first act of the story had ended, but the real storm was only beginning. The week that followed became one of the most chaotic media cycles in recent memory. Every platform was flooded with theories, reactions, and emotional takes. People replayed the same few seconds of footage from the Utah Valley Arena over and over, dissecting every sound and every flicker of movement. What had once been a single moment of tragedy had turned into a massive public investigation, run not by journalists or authorities, but by millions of ordinary people online. The difference between what was fact and what was assumption began to blur. Many pointed back to the forgiveness video. They said something about Erica Kirk's calm composure didn't feel real. Her words, "I forgive him," had struck a chord across the nation, but to others, they sounded rehearsed. Some even compared her tone to a public relations campaign. Within days, she announced that she would continue her husband's work, hosting his podcast, organizing events, and promising that the movement he started would not stop. But the timing felt too fast, too coordinated. The way she appeared in front of cameras, the way the lighting was set, even the phrasing of her sentences, all seemed to follow a deliberate plan. Critics began saying the tragedy had been turned into a product. Grief has become content. One online post declared, gathering hundreds of thousands of shares. This isn't a story about faith or forgiveness. It's a marketing campaign built on sympathy. The more Erica spoke, the more the skepticism grew. Within the first week, she had launched 3 separate public appearances, including a major event in a stadium. People were confused. How could someone who had just lost her husband appear so composed, so ready to lead? Charlie's family remained silent, while Erica's media presence seemed to multiply by the hour. Then came a wave of online investigators. People dug into her past, claiming to find ties, that no one could verify connections to Romania, to business networks, to political donors. Some pointed to footage from earlier months where Erica discussed influence, leadership, and faith in ways that, in hindsight, seemed to foreshadow her new role. Soon, dozens of videos appeared on TikTok and YouTube alleging hidden motives behind her every move. In each, commentators spoke with conviction, but none presented evidence. As confusion mounted, contradictions began to appear in the official narrative. At first, authorities said the shooter had acted alone. Then, a few days later, reports hinted that he might not have been working by himself. The timeline of events changed slightly with each statement. Eyewitnesses contradicted one another. Some claimed they had seen 2 men near the stage before the chaos. Others said only one. Then, photos of the alleged weapon began circulating online, and they didn't match what spectators had described. The color was different, the length was off, even the scope looked wrong. That was when online communities truly exploded. Amateur analysts began slowing down every frame of every leaked video, syncing sound from audience recordings to match gunfire patterns. Some claimed there were extra noises that didn't align with a single shooter. Others insisted there were lighting glitches that indicated tampering. What should have been a straightforward police matter had turned into a public obsession. Each small detail was treated like evidence in a court of public opinion that had no judge, no rules, and no patience. The phrase, security reasons, used to explain why the full footage wasn't being released, became a lightning rod. Every influencer, commentator, and podcast host began speculating about what that phrase really meant. Theories multiplied endlessly. Some said there was a conspiracy to hide government involvement. Others thought the event's organizers were covering up negligence. Still, others believed the footage would prove that the story everyone had been told was incomplete. Meanwhile, Erica Kirk continued to appear calm and unwavering. When she did speak, her words were brief and perfectly measured. She thanked supporters, expressed her faith, and never directly addressed the rumors. But to many, her silence seemed too controlled, not grief. Stricken silence, but strategic silence. Her every appearance became an event in itself, dissected frame by frame across social media. Then, another voice entered the storm. Once again, Joe Rogan's podcast drew global attention. He didn't accuse anyone, but his tone carried a quiet skepticism that electrified listeners. He spoke about inconsistencies in the reports, why some footage was missing, why witness accounts didn't align, and why the supposed evidence kept changing. He wondered aloud why no one close to Charlie Kirk had come forward to speak publicly, not even Erica. His calm doubt hit harder than outrage could. He didn't make claims, he simply asked the questions everyone else was afraid to ask. Within hours, his comments went viral. The name Erica Kirk became the most searched term across platforms. People began calling her the woman of silence, both admiring and distrusting her in equal measure. Old interviews resurfaced where she had discussed destiny and power, and those clips were edited to seem prophetic. Turning Point USA soon announced that Erica had been appointed the new CEO. To some, it was an act of strength, a woman carrying forward her husband's legacy. To others, it was proof that this had been orchestrated all along. Debate raged across the internet. Supporters celebrated her leadership, calling her a symbol of faith and resilience. Critics said she was playing a role, taking advantage of public sympathy to secure control. They noted how quickly her public image was reshaped from widow to leader, from mourner to icon. Videos analyzing her tone, body language, and choice of words filled every feed. Some claimed her gestures on stage contained hidden messages. Others argued that her silence was a shield. As all this unfolded, Rogan made another cryptic remark on his show. "There's something wrong with this story." He didn't say more, but the words spread like wildfire. They were quoted, remixed, subtitled, and posted millions of times. Those 6 words became a rallying cry for everyone who believed the public was being deceived. "Something doesn't add up" appeared on T-shirts, comment threads, and even protest signs outside Turning Point USA headquarters. Erica, meanwhile, vanished from public view. No interviews, no statements, no posts. Then came the announcement that she had officially assumed leadership at Turning Point USA. That silence, rather than calming things down, made the story grow even more intense. Supporters framed her retreat as grace under fire. Skeptics called it calculated avoidance. Her absence became a blank screen onto which the world could project whatever story it wanted. When she finally reappeared, it was on stage once again dressed entirely in black, her demeanor calm but almost defiant. The cameras zoomed in on her every movement. Her speech lasted less than 5 minutes. "Thank you to everyone who still believes in the mission we started together," she said softly. "We will continue. We will not stop." No mention of Rogan, no acknowledgement of the theories. Just those few sentences delivered with unsettling precision. The room held its breath, then erupted in applause. Online, opinions split instantly. Supporters called it her rebirth, a moment of power and faith. Detractors called it a performance, even alleging that she was reading from a teleprompter written by Turning Point's board. Every frame of the video was broken down, analyzed, slowed, and reposted. Her breathing, the direction of her gaze, the tone of her voice, all were treated like evidence in a trial that existed only on the internet. Soon after, 2 words began trending everywhere: the Kirk files. Reddit threads, YouTube essays, and investigative TikTok series popped up overnight. Some users tracked what they claimed were her travel records, pointing to a private flight that had left Arizona hours after Rogan's podcast aired. No one could confirm any of it, but online confirmation wasn't required anymore. The perception of truth had become more powerful than truth itself. Within days, headlines screamed that Erica had gone missing. Major outlets quietly admitted they couldn't verify her location, but the internet didn't wait. The story had already moved on, and as the days passed, silence once again became the loudest sound in the room. Days turned into weeks, and what had begun as a shocking tragedy transformed into a full-blown national obsession. Every new detail about Erica Kirk's whereabouts, every unverified screenshot, and every whispered rumor became breaking news in the digital world. Mainstream media outlets tried to keep up, but they no longer controlled the story. The narrative now lived in the hands of millions of people online who were convinced that something far deeper and darker lay beneath the surface. Then came the leaks. Anonymous accounts began posting what they claimed were internal communications from Turning Point USA. These messages suggested that Erica's sudden leadership had been planned weeks before the tragedy took place. Emails appeared to show early drafts of public statements and prepared social media campaigns, all dated before the event. Screenshots of supposed text exchanges circulated, showing staff discussing how to handle optics. Whether the documents were authentic or not didn't seem to matter. They spread everywhere, and with each repost, people grew more certain that this was never an accident, it was a design. Podcasters and commentators dove in. Some read through the leaks line by line, pausing dramatically as if uncovering a national secret. Others framed it as proof that the grieving widow narrative had been scripted long before Charlie Kirk ever walked onto that stage. Still, the most unnerving theory came from a small but vocal group of researchers online who began connecting the dots between Erica's personal history and an international network of organizations. They claimed she had attended private conferences overseas years earlier, involving political figures, media executives, and financial donors, all part of what they called a hidden machine of influence. The evidence was circumstantial, but that didn't matter to a public desperate for answers. Videos featuring these theories were viewed millions of times. "This isn't a conspiracy," one host insisted. "This is a performance on a global scale. The stage just happens to be political." The idea that grief, religion, and patriotism had been woven together into a psychological operation captured imaginations everywhere. Meanwhile, Joe Rogan's comments continued to ripple through the cultural landscape. Clips from his podcast were edited, remixed, and reinterpreted, with many claiming he had predicted every new twist before it happened. He never outright accused anyone of wrongdoing, but his tone, curious, skeptical, calm, became the soundtrack to the chaos. When he said, "There's too much smoke here for there not to be fire," it became a mantra for those who believed they were uncovering a hidden truth. Amid all this, a new video surfaced. A supposed behind the scenes clip from the night of the event showed Erica standing just offstage seconds before the first gunshot. Her expression was unreadable, calm, focused, almost detached. The footage spread like wildfire, with some arguing that it was proof of her involvement, while others said it showed nothing out of the ordinary. Analysts broke it down frame by frame, measuring her posture, her breathing, and even the angle of her gaze. Every microsecond became a clue in the collective investigation that refused to end. Turning Point USA issued a firm denial, calling the footage selectively edited and maliciously misleading. They warned of legal action against anyone spreading false information. But the damage was done, public trust was gone, and even those who wanted to believe in Erica's innocence began to hesitate. The more the organization tried to control the story, the less control they seemed to have. Silence no longer protected them, it only deepened the suspicion. As the noise grew louder, attention turned toward the official investigation. Journalists discovered inconsistencies in the police reports. The name of the supposed shooter, Tyler James Robinson, appeared in conflicting databases. His hometown records were incomplete. Some said he had no social media presence at all, while others found old accounts with strange, coded messages. His supposed family never appeared on camera. Even his photo, the one shown by every major outlet, was questioned, with online users claiming it had been digitally altered. The deeper people dug, the less sense any of it made. Witness statements contradicted timelines. Security personnel refused to speak publicly. One journalist claimed to have obtained medical documents suggesting that Charlie Kirk's injuries didn't match the reported weapon. Another insisted that the shooter's arrest happened hours later than stated in the official report. None of these claims were confirmed, but each added another layer of uncertainty. Then, a shocking detail emerged. A man who had been detained at the scene, described in early reports as mentally unstable, turned out to have appeared in multiple unrelated incidents across the years. Videos from the September 11th attacks, the Boston bombings, and other mass events showed a man with eerily similar features. Online investigators placed the images side by side, insisting it was the same person. Authorities dismissed it as coincidence, but the theory refused to die. The internet had already decided he was part of something bigger, a shadow actor who appeared whenever tragedy struck. In the middle of all this, a new narrative began to take hold, one that questioned the very nature of truth. "Maybe none of this is real," said one viral commentator. "Maybe the whole thing, from the tragedy to the forgiveness to the conspiracy, is a simulation. A psychological experiment designed to measure how far people will go to believe what they see online." The idea spread faster than any official explanation ever could. For some it was terrifying, for others it was liberating. Reality itself had become negotiable. Weeks later, Erica Kirk finally reappeared. This time it was in a quiet video message uploaded to what appeared to be an official Turning Point channel. She sat alone in a softly lit room, wearing simple clothes and no makeup. Her tone was subdued, her voice calm. "There has been much said about me," she began. "Much of it is false, but I want everyone to know faith is the only truth that cannot be fabricated. The rest of it will pass." That was all she said before the screen faded to black. The video was under 2 minutes long, yet it sparked an explosion of interpretations. Some viewers said she looked frightened, others said she appeared resolute. A few claimed her hand gestures formed symbols that hinted at hidden messages. The clip was downloaded, slowed down, color corrected, and analyzed endlessly. What she had meant by "the rest of it will pass" became the subject of countless debates. Soon after, Turning Point USA announced that Erica had temporarily stepped back from her leadership role. No further explanation was given. In the following days, her social media accounts vanished, deleted, or deactivated. No one knew. Every trace of her public presence began to disappear. The forgiveness speech, the interviews, the stage appearances all slowly wiped from the internet. Only scattered uploads remained, preserved by people who refused to let the story die. By the time October ended, the event had morphed into something unrecognizable. It was no longer about Charlie Kirk or even about Erica. It had become a story about control of media, of faith, of perception itself. What had started as a tragedy had evolved into a mirror, reflecting the confusion of an entire culture. In the void of verified truth, people built their own versions of reality, each one certain that theirs was the right one. In the end, no clear answers ever emerged. The investigation quietly closed, citing insufficient evidence. No one was charged. No official explanation satisfied the public. But the internet had already written its own ending. That grief had been manufactured, faith had been weaponized, and the truth, whatever it once was, had been lost in the storm. The story faded from headlines, but it never really disappeared. Clips resurfaced every few months, reigniting debate among new audiences who hadn't lived through the chaos firsthand. For them, it wasn't just a mystery, it was a warning. A reminder that in an age where every tragedy is recorded, shared, and analyzed, the line between authenticity and performance no longer exists. That sometimes the most dangerous thing of all isn't the lie, it's the story everyone wants to believe.